I think 1991 will have an upward bias.
The Fed has a lot of control over short-term rates, less over long-term rates, which are responsive to those inflation fears that Jim just raised. What do you think is going to happen to long-term? Also down?
Well, I think long-term rates will work their way down, but you're absolutely right. That is the key. And I think that will probably be a little sticking point as we work our way through 1991.
Lou Holland, let's get your number.
Well, basically, we've had 3 years of virtually no money growth. And so I think we ought to be focusing in on the money growth and their effect also on interest rates. And so I think if, in fact, we have an easing on the part of the Fed, we should see a little bit more activity in terms of the economy. So I think going forward, you know, into 1991, I think the key thing I would be looking at is the availability of credit.
Marty Zweig, what's your biggest concern?
I agree with Lou. Money supply growth has been terrible, and I would look for that to improve if I were going to get bullish on the economy or the markets, and also availability of credit and new loans. Without that, the economy will stagnate and go down.
Is money supply increasing at a more rapid rate recently?
Not that I know of.
You still think it's much too tight?
I believe so. I mean, the last 2 weeks has been up somewhat, but more recently, over a month or two, it has not. In fact, the year-to-year change in M3 is getting close to zero now.
You think that's because of excessive concern about inflation?
I don't know that it's so much the Federal Reserve pressing against inflation. I think it's more the inability or unwillingness of banks to loan out money, which actually makes money grow, or not grow in this case.
Now, I just touched briefly on regulators in my opening commentary. Is it because the regulators are too tough or because the banks themselves are scared?
I think it's a combination of both. The banks have a lot of bad loans, and they're afraid to make new loans to marginal borrowers.
All righty. Now comes the moment that some of us have been waiting for, the moment of painful truth, as we contrast what really happened in 1990 with what our panelists predicted. And though I hate to admit it, they actually survived the year of Saddam Hussein remarkably well. In terms of the Dow's closing high for the year, they boxed the real result completely. 13 panelists too optimistic, 13 panelists too pessimistic. The winner was Carter Randall, who predicted 3,001, just a point and a quarter above the actual high. And exactly the same balance was recorded on those year-ago predictions for the Dow's closing low in 1990. The winner in that category was Ed Brown, whose 2375 forecast was less than 10 points above the actual low. As for where the Dow would end 1990, that one's still up for grabs, since there will be another day of trading on Monday. But based on today's close, just above 2629, the winner would be Joel Stern, who predicted 2630. Not bad for a bunch of human beings, but we'll keep on trying until they get it exactly right. Don't hold your breath. Jim Grant, your boundless pessimism finally found an accommodating boundary this year. You still weren't much help on the overall market. You said we'd be down to 2,000 by now, but your list of investment suggestions, 5 short sales, that is, bets that 5 stocks would tumble, went 5 for 5. And your list was up a whopping 59% for the year. So now we know the answer to the question, why is this man smiling? Ralph Acampora, you demonstrated that there's more than one way to skin a market. While notably sunnier than Jim, you thought the Dow would rise above 3,100 at its high. Your list included longs and shorts, and according to our friends at Bloomberg Financial Markets, who compiled all these statistics, was up an average 26.5%. Could it be that there's something to this technical analysis after all?
Oh, absolutely. Charts do help.
Lou Holland, your overall predictions were remarkably good. Your high forecast of 29.96 was less than 4 points off target, for example. And your list of varied investment suggestions, which would have done even better if you hadn't hedged with some gold, turned in a gain of nearly 5%. Marty Zweig, you worried a lot in 1990, so what else is new, old buddy? But your list just did manage to squeeze into the plus column, which was not a bad performance at all, 12 months ahead of a year in which all the major averages were down, even with dividends reinvested. So for heaven's sakes, in 1991, I don't want to see you relaxing for a minute.
Won't do it.
You promise?
Promise.
It's not a bad performance for this bunch, I have to confess, in a year marked by unexpected dramas at home and abroad. But what have they done for us lately? Let's have from each of them the true inside word on the highest close, the lowest close, and the final close for the Dow Jones Industrial Average in 1991. Jim?
To borrow from Galbraith, I predict not because I know, but because I'm asked. The Dow will close at 2,000. Its low will be 1,900. Its high will be 2658. And does that Do it.
It does it very well, except I didn't know that you didn't know the answer to the question. I wouldn't have asked you if I known you were in doubt. Ralph?
Well, I think we can manage a slight new high this year. That'll be around 3,100. It'll be the top end of my range.
Around 3,100.
It will be 3,100, okay. The low range, I think we'll test the lower end of the range, not make a new low, and it'll be 24.25. I think we'll have a rally towards the end of the year and end at somewhere at around 29.75.
All righty. Lou?
I think we're going to reach a high of 27.51 sometime in the first half of the year. I think we'll have a low sometime in the latter part of the year of 1991. And I think we'll rally back to close at 23.01.
23.01 exactly, or is there adjustment?
23.01.
Okay. Marty?
For what it's worth, a high of 28.75, a low of 19.75, and a close of 22.35.
So, in fact, none of the four of you is predicting a vast change from the numbers we've seen in 1990. Jim a little faster than some of the others, but what else is new? One thing is for sure, and this is the only thing I guarantee, some of them will be wrong. But now let's get down to specifics and find out what each of them thinks will be the best investments of 1991. Jim?
Well, I would be short my own forecasting record of 1990. The second best idea is to be short of crude oil. It will certainly, I think, be lower than it is today, although it might get up to 50 on the way down there. Gold will benefit from the discredit elsewhere. One should also continue to be short common stocks that are exposed to the contraction in credit, and I would suggest, among others, Household International and Wells Fargo, a big real estate bank, and Marriott and Merrill Lynch, other such investment-grade names.
Would you break down how you would do that on a 100% basis? So we
I'd, as long as we're dealing with imaginary money, I would apportion it equally, but my strong...
A third, or?
Right, right. My strongest idea of a lot, I think, is crude oil. I'm excited about that one.
I've never known you to be crude. Ralph?
Lou, I think I start off with the same one that Jim did. I would buy a put option on a crude oil. I'd also buy a call option on the U.S. dollar index, because I think the dollar is bottoming out and will do well this year. To take advantage of declining interest rates, which I foresee in 1991, Federal National Mortgage would be the stock that I would look at. FNM is the symbol. Philip Morris, I think, a wonderful firm, big blue chip stock that I think has a lot more to go on the upside. Bristol Myers, taking advantage of the strength and momentum in the drug area. And if I'm wrong on all five of those, I have one stock. If I lose my shirt on those five, I think I'll have something to wear. It'll be Fruit of the Loom, and that would be my little kicker in the portfolio.
If that's the only one that goes up, maybe you would model it for it.
Absolutely.
Lou Holland.
I, too, like bonds. I like the long Treasury bond, so I've allocated 30% of my portfolio to the long Treasury bond, even though I'm not as enthusiastic as I was at 9%. At 8.30, I guess they're still worth about 30% of the portfolio. Also, I would have 20% equally split, shorting the Japanese yen futures and also the U.S., being long the U.S. dollar. Then I have some shorts.
I'll have to have them real fast.
LA Gear, Live Entertainment, Manufacturers Hanover, Cray Research, Millicom, and two longs, Valero Energy and Fannie Mae.
Marty?
30% essentially cash, which would be the 6 5/8 notes of February 92. 30% intermediate bonds in the 8s of October 96, and 10% each in 4 stocks: ASA, Detroit Edison, Upjohn, those are longs, and a short in Mid-Atlantic Corp, or Mid-Atlantic Corp, the bank.
I noticed that one of your longs, ASA, is gold stock. Does that suggest you think gold's going to go up?
I'm not necessarily bullish on gold. It's a hedge in case something bad happens in Russia or the Mideast.
And do you predict that you'll be worried all through the year as well?
Always. That's the only prediction I'm ever right on anyway.
Well, I think you've done a terrific job tonight, gentlemen. Thank you very much. There we do have to stop. Thanks to these 4 panelists, once again proving they're the world's best sports. I hope you'll be back with us again next week. Then we'll get an insight into the year ahead from a woman who has herself shown some remarkable insights into the year that is just about to conclude, Abby Joseph Cohn, who is one of the most respected and influential investment strategists around. She'll be giving us her forecast for 91, so let's start the new year right together. Meanwhile, this has been Wall Street Week. I'm Louis Rukeyser. Good night, and may 1991 bring you everything you deserve, plus 20%.
Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser. has been made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. By the Travelers, insurance and related financial services working to provide financial peace of mind for over 40 million Americans. By Enron, providing natural gas which holds the promise for a cleaner world and a more energy-independent America. Enron Corp. And the Enron Foundation. And by Prudential Beach Securities. Rock solid. Market-wise. For a transcript of this year-end program, which includes all our panelists' predictions for 1991, send $7 to Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser transcripts, Owings Mills, Maryland, 21117. Maryland residents add 35 cents sales tax. For faster service, call 1-900-346-9191. Your telephone bill will be charged $7 and a transcript sent to you by return mail. Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser is produced by Maryland Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content.
This is PBS.